Hi, well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. My name's Hugh Simpson-Wells from Oxford Computer Group. This is the first in a four-part series then on how Identity Panel Suite can replace MIM when the time is right and provide many additional benefits in the meantime. And this particular one is called a dashboard for visualizing and managing your identity data. While we're waiting for the last few people, I'm just going to put a poll up. And this is just to help us understand who's here today and what you're looking for and what your current situation is. Don't feel obliged, but it would help us to know. Majority of you are looking for a replacement, or you're actively looking for a replacement, just over the 50% mark. And I don't see any further responses coming in, so we'll just close that. Thank you very much for that. Okay, I'm going to get straight into this. Identity Panel Suite consists of 5 applications. There's a core application, Identity Panel, which provides the platform for the others. So it does the gathering of data, it has the reporting, the visualization, and so on. Hypersync Panel is a synchronization engine, and you can think of it as a straightforward replacement on steroids for MIM synchronization. Service Panel allows you to securely share identity information with your users. So it's a forms-based, it's a web portal with forms. You can think of it as overlapping heavily with the MIM portal. Access Panel is a governance tool that would replace Behold very easily, but also the group management facilities within MIM and much more. It's a full governance package. So we'll be covering those 3 in the coming 3 weeks, each Tuesday. I'm not going to be talking about Test Panel, except to say now that it is a formal testing harness for your identity management system. But today we're going to be talking about Identity Panel. As I say, it is a foundational piece, and it's important really to understand this in order to get the most out of the next 3 webinars. I've got just a few slides, and then we're going to be into mostly demo for the rest of the half hour. So Identity Panel then, what it's about is monitoring and analyzing operations from disparate identity repositories. So we know the scene here. There's a basic assumption here that you're familiar with MIM, or just at least the idea of MIM. And so we have these various repositories. We have directories. You might have several Active Directory forests, probably Azure AD. You're going to have sources of truth, so HR systems, but also contractor registration systems, student registration systems, and so on. You might have several of these, and you might want to mediate between them. Then you've got other services that you want to connect to. The idea is that Identity Panel will present a joined-up view of each identity. So there's an implication straight away that it has to have a way of joining them up, and it will use some common, unique attribute to do that, typically an employee ID or an email address, but very similar to the way you would do things in MIM. It also, because it stores history, it can show you the life cycle of these objects. It shows you the relationship to other identities, so it's very easy to jump from a user to the user's manager, or to the people they manage, or from a group to the members, or from a person to a group they happen to be a member of. It also covers operational activity, and that's important when we talk about MIM, which we'll come to a little bit later. Identity Panel then stores a history. As it scans the systems regularly for changes, it stores those changes, and subject to a retention policy, which can be set for several years if you want. It's got a workflow engine. It's got reporting capabilities, so it's able to produce reports, not merely of the way data looks now, but the way it looked at any point in time, given that it's kept this history. So you can ask for a report as though it were produced a year ago, or a week ago, or a month ago. The workflow engine allows you to send emails, kick off programs, send a report to somebody, run a PowerShell script, And those workflows will be kicked off by data changes or possibly time changes. It has a very special relationship with MIM because Identity Panel was really written for MIM. And so that relationship extends to controlling it and presenting the MIM operational data in a rather more useful way than MIM does itself. It scans, stores, and presents MIM data along with all the other repositories that it can talk to. So that includes the portal and, of course, the connector spaces and the metaverse in the sync engine. And because Azure ID Connect is really just another version of MIM with a funny hat on, it's also is pretty intimately related to that too. Identity Panel, importantly, makes the identity data available to the other Identity Panel suite apps, which is why this is a foundational piece. But we'll come to that in the next few weeks. This diagram is just trying to show really the kind of setup I'm looking at and to help me just define a few things in advance. We've got, as an absolute minimum here, an HR system, a source of truth, 2 directories, AD and Azure AD. And presumably they're being synchronized in some way. We'll assume MIM for the moment, but it could be Hypersync Panel, it could be something else entirely, but we'll say it's MIM for the sake of argument. But I'm not interested in that at the moment. We're not getting involved in synchronization this week. That's for next week. We're simply going to look at scanning and presenting the data, so a dashboard for your identity data. By regularly scanning these systems, it can get a picture of what a given user, a given identity looks like across these systems, and we can present them side by side, as you'll see. As I say, there has to be some way of joining, but that's true of MIM as well. And then the idea of these gradually fading out things going down is we can look at the history. We can look at this at any point in the past. We can kick off reports based on that. We can kick off workflows based on changes that happen. Just a quick note on the overall architecture and on security. It's cloud-based by design. It is not something that's been shoehorned into the cloud later on in a sort of pretend way. It's absolutely cloud-based. We're looking at a cloud service primarily sitting on a MongoDB database with the Elasticsearch search engine. But because there will be on-premises things going on, notably Active Directory, for example, MIM, if MIM is still around, on any server that's we're interested in including, there will be an agent on-premise, the panel service that can talk to local repositories and securely communicate with the cloud service. So it's highly performant. That's something that won't be quite so relevant today, but as we go on to look at synchronization, it will be. And security is taken absolutely seriously, both at the architectural level and the identity level, where you can have granular security right down to a given person with this role can see these objects and these attributes, and that will be pervasive, whether they're looking at reports or they're looking at data directly or whatever it is. So I'm going to go into demo now, and my demo pretty much mirrors what we're looking at here. The first thing I'm going to do is I'm in a server. I'm looking at Active Directory users and computers, and I'm going to pick on a person that I'm going to use for demo purposes. Now, I've got lots of users in lots of OUs, but in particular, I've got a research OU in the UK, and I've got a research OU in the US. I've got this guy with the unlikely name of Albert Einstein, and that happens to be the vice president of this department, the research department. He has a manager, and he has people that report to him. These will be the people presumably in this OU and in the other corresponding OU. So we've got a perfectly normal Active Directory user. The next thing we want is to see the cloud end of things. So if I go to Azure, simply I'm in the portal, the Azure portal. I'm looking at users. Here's my list of users, and here is Albert Einstein. And if we were to look at some of Einstein's properties, we would end up seeing all the kind of stuff you'd normally expect to see. But let's also have a quick look at groups, because groups are important too. And we'll find that there are quite a few groups here. The one I'm going to be interested in is this research one. And it would not be amazing to find, if I looked at the members, that Einstein was a member of that too, and there he is. Okay, so we've got an instance of this user, a representation of our hapless Einstein, both in AD and Azure AD. Let's now see what that looks like in IdentiPanel. So when you start up IdentiPanel, you come into a dashboard. The dashboard you see depends on who you are and how it's been configured. I'm not going to concern myself with that just at the moment. I'm going to go straight into the main way that we tend to view data. I've searched for Einstein and I've found somebody in Workday here. Presumably this is going to be our man. Now I'll just show you how it might have come up had I not been playing around with it before. And here are a number of what we call silos. So these silos represent the external systems that we're talking to, plus a few on the right here that I'm not going to get involved with today, but will be important next week and the week after. I'm also looking at it in a fairly raw manner, where the account expires date is just a file time, and the user account control is just a number. You probably know what that means, but I'm going to use what's called a shutter view, simply a filtered view that allows me to change the way I'm looking at it. I've excluded the silos I'm not interested, and I've presented the data in a slightly different way. So we can see what 512 meant down here. We can see the data here. Okay, so we've got this is called the time traveler, and the reason it's called the time traveler is because from the drop down here now I can see all of the times at which something happened in Workday. If I go right back to the beginning, this is because Workday is the focus here. If I go right back to the beginning, that's not the beginning, there we are, I missed. The very first time we met this guy, he was only in Workday. As I move forward in time, click by click here, on these different dates, you see how he became synchronized to AD and Azure AD, and then it filled in with other data. And then actually we've got a change here. Green means something new. So a mobile phone got added later on, and then it got modified. Presumably whoever added it did it wrong, because blue means modify. Eventually we'll end up at now, the current time. Now that was just looking at changes that happened in Workday, but if I check this box that says dates from all silos, sometimes it's an overwhelming amount of data, which is why you have the checkbox. But in this case, what it means is I can now look at the changes in a little bit more detail as the changes happened in other silos as well. So if I go backwards this time, you'll see at some point where a mobile number changed in AD, where it changed in Azure AD, where it changed in Workday, that's the HR system. If I keep going back, you'll see the addition of a number there. I know that because it's green. The addition of a number in Azure AD and the addition in Workday. Another way that I can look at that information is I can simply click the attribute and I can see how the attribute changed in any of the silos, when it changed, and so on. Another thing to draw your attention to is that if I just go back to the now state, back to the current state of the object, not surprisingly, we see that Albert has a manager. Okay, I can hover over that and see what it is if I want to. But also he's manager of a number of people. Now, manager of is an invented attribute. Whenever IdentiPanel sees a reference attribute, it'll always create an of version. So manager, manager of, member, member of, and so on. This is super useful. And these are hyperlinks. So I can click this and go and see one of the people that reports to him. Now this particular person is also a member of a group, a member of the very group that we were talking about. So I can also click through to that and see the group. So you'll see how we can easily navigate around and focus on the information we want. If this group existed in AD as well, we would be seeing two silos here. As it happens, it's a pure Azure AD group. Now, I can keep hopping around like this, but a really useful thing to do is to have a look at the history of something like membership. Because member is a much more complicated attribute, being a reference attribute and a multi-value attribute, we have to have a slightly different way of searching. If I just do a default search, I simply end up with when the system, or is it the internet, responds, I will end up with a list of all the members, when they were added, possibly when they were deleted. And we do see something slightly odd here. This guy, Frodo Baggins, whoever he is added and deleted one day, and then added and deleted another day as well. So we might find that suspicious and interesting to look at. Another way we might have searched is to search perhaps for Frodo. Now that we've identified there's something odd, we might want to just make sure we've got all those instances of Frodo doing that. We can also search for any members added after a date, removed before a date, that kind of stuff, all kinds of different searches that are possible. Okay, so we've had a bit of a look at what we call the time traveler. We'll be seeing it again later on, but it's the primary way that we view data. And I personally just think it's super clever that they found a way of presenting what is quite a lot of complicated information. Let's take a look at another of these tabs up here. Let's take a look at reporting. Now, reports can be a bit boring, and we can imagine reports, once we've got the data, that can do all sorts of things like list rogue users of various kinds simply by looking at who hasn't signed in or who's expired but they're still active, that kind of stuff. We could also look for unused licenses and things like that. I'm going to go for something actually really rather simple, just to show you in principle how reports work. This is users with or without a manager. I'm going to choose without. I'm simply going to get myself a list of people who haven't got a manager. Simple admin stuff. Now, there are 19 of them, starting with the also unlikely Alan Turing. If I, on the other hand, choose a point in time, if I just go back a couple of days and run and build again, I get something slightly different. I get 20 rows because I've now got my friend Albert in here as well. So you're seeing how you can produce a report for any point in time. Just to prove how that works, I can click this link, be taken again to the time traveler. And again, I will choose the shutter view that I want. And you'll see that, yes, indeed, you've got a manager. If I go back a bit in time, no manager. So we're seeing the consistency there between the data. So this historical information is available from a reporting perspective as well as in the time traveler. Next, I want to show you the dashboard. We skipped over it at the beginning, but it is actually the first place you come to normally. There are various modules that might appear here. I'm going to draw your attention, first of all, to platform health. So we've got green ticks showing us that various stuff is absolutely fine. And then we've got some exclamation marks showing that something's not fine. Now, because this is a demo system and not a real system, I haven't got regular scans going on. It's only being scanned when I get round to doing it manually rather than having a schedule for it. And so what it's complaining about is, well, it hasn't been scanned recently. Well, I can fix that because I can simply choose Delta scans and tell it to go and do that. Now, the platform health only gets round to updating every minute or so. So I'll just talk about a few other things while we wait for that to come up. We could, if we had MIM here, have all sorts of MIM health probes, particularly relating to database sizes and disk space and memory and that kind of stuff. We've also got something here called a system status check. You'll see that apparently you haven't checked in recently. This is just somewhere where I can say all okay, to show that somebody came along and had a look at the system. But I could equally report a problem. I could be reporting an issue, and it's just a simple way we have of tracking issues. And that will also hopefully change that red exclamation mark eventually. We've got charts, and there's not a lot going on in this chart. Again, this is a demo system. It shows a bunch of stuff happening when we built the system and created lots of fictitious users. And then when I was mucking about yesterday, there are a few things going on, but there's not a lot happening. Ordinarily, you might see a lot of activity. And of course, we'll see an example of this later. As the green ticks have now come up for AD scans and Azure scans, the other one will come up in due course. So if I were now to take a look at this and just mouse over, I can see that there were 54 ads at a particular date and time. If I click that, I'm taken through to another tab, the History tab. I think maybe you're not seeing things quite as quickly as I'm talking about them. I'll try and adjust for that. So what we're looking at here is a particular operation that happened at a particular date and time, lots of details about it. It was successful. There were 54 ads. If I change the number of items to a page, I can quickly scroll down here, and these are all the items that were added at that time. They're all hyperlinks, so I can click through and to the time traveler and see what's going on if I want to. Ordinarily, if I come into history, I'm going to see a big long list. It's useful to reduce that, to filter that in some way. I might be interested in what's going on with Azure, and the way we talk to Azure is through the Graph API, so it says Azure Graph Scan. And I might be only interested in those cases where there at least were some statistics, because it's lots of times we do a scan, nothing's happened, not interesting. And as I go down all of these, you'll see various things going on, not a great deal actually. If I maybe click this one, here, 8 updates went through and 8 deletes. If I'd like to focus more on the deletes, I could just hide that. And there we see something that went on at that time. And I might well want to click through some of these and analyze what's going on. Now, at this point, you might be thinking, well, doesn't this operations sort of tool, this history tool, look a little bit like the operations tool in MimSync? And the answer is a little bit. But the difference is that while MimSync does have hyperlinks, these hyperlinks will only take you through to the current state of the object. The beauty of this is that as you click through to one of these, perhaps Ron Weasley, you're going to see Ron Weasley at that time. So you can actually really properly analyze what was going on with the data at that time. Now, I need to expand a little bit what we're talking about to include MIM. And to achieve that, I'm going to switch to a different demo. So I'm now in a different instance, a different tenant, if you like. This is actually a public demo system, which anybody could get access to if they wanted to. And the dashboard's different. As I say, the dashboard you see depends on the configuration, and it also depends on who you are. We've got different health checks going on. We've got a run history, which is really intended very much to look like the MIM run history. It shows an Active Directory export, a MIM Delta Sync, a MIM Portal Delta Sync, I beg your pardon, an Active Directory export, and so an ADLDS full sync, and so on. All things you'll be reasonably familiar with if you know MIM, except that it's being managed from here and viewed from here. And we could, as I say, click through to any of these, through to the history to see them. But we've also got all this lovely activity going on, and I can mouse over any of these points and see what's going on, and perhaps click through. There were 3 sync errors there. That might be interesting. So it's taking me to just the history entry. Again, I've got a bit of a delay here, just the history entry for that one instance. And you'll see that a number of things were happening, but the thing I want to focus on is these errors. So I'll hide these, and I'll see, oh yeah, well, there were some errors here. And maybe I would want to dig further into that. Again, by clicking through here, I simply go through to see what that person looked like at that time. Now, what you see here is a much richer, I'm just going to go forward to the current status to now. What you see here is a much richer view. Because we're connected to MIM and Azure AD Connect and Office and other things, we're seeing lots of silos. So for example, well, let me just, first of all, I'm just going to get the PeopleSoft, the HR system in this case. I'm making it, what I did there was I clicked to make it the focused silo. That's because, and this is just perhaps me, I tend to think of things as going left to right. I tend to think of, well, here on the left is the source of truth, and here on the right are the places it's flowing to. Now, I'm not interested in Azure AD Connect right now, so I'm going to just suppress those. I'm going to collapse those silos so they're just not using up real estate here. And what you see is I have got silos for each of the connector spaces in MIM. I've got MIM ADLDS, I've got MIM Active Directory, I've got some legacy SQL system, I've got the PeopleSoft system, of course, and I've also got the portal over here. The metaverse is another silo. If you're familiar with MIM, you'll understand the metaverse. If you don't worry about it, and I will be covering the metaverse and indeed what we call the hyperverse next week when we talk about synchronization. What I'm interested in here is the relationship to MIM. So we've pulled in the data just like with all the other silos that we've talked about, but if I switch this on, this is called contrails, and if I click a particular attribute on the left here, we can actually see how in MIM this data is used everywhere else in the system. These are attribute flows of various kinds. If there's a question mark, it means that there'll be some kind of a rule behind it rather than a simple direct attribute flow. And you'll see that it's contributed to display name, given name, email address, SAM account name, and then those have flowed through elsewhere. If I click on something like employee status, we can see how that's flowed through into the metaverse to say whether an account's enabled and how it's flowed out to user account control in AD. As I say, if you click this, you can see, maybe you can see, if I get it right this time, you can see the actual details of the rule. One more thing to show you in relation to the MIM integration here, and that is how it controls the schedule. You'll be aware that the MIM doesn't have a scheduler of its own. It needs something else to do it, and this is the perfect tool for doing it. So if I look at this Delta Sync one, now we know that Delta Syncs happen often in MIM, and this is happening from 8 in the morning till 8 at night, every 15 minutes. Set this up for as often as you want. And here are all the steps. It is telling MIM to do a Delta import on AD, a Delta sync on AD, and so on and so on and so on, exports and imports and syncs. And if we look at, for example, this one, which is pulling data from the MIM portal, I can show you how it can be enriched by having conditions as to whether this should run or not, or perhaps have a skip rule. What this actually says here is, if you didn't get any data at all as a result of this import, skip the next 3 steps because there's no point in doing them. So this is the kind of thing that we can do. Okay, I've tried to cram in a huge amount of demo into the short time I got available, and I will answer any questions that you have. I've got just a couple, and I will also, if there are any questions that come in late, I'll be sending out answers in an email. Let me just put my PowerPoints back up. I wanted to quickly draw your attention to some key points. Cloud-based by design, highly performant by design. It keeps a data history which is relevant to time traveler and point-in-time reports. It has an intimate understanding of MIM, so it can coexist with MIM, it can enhance MIM. As we'll see, it can also replace MIM, and we'll be going over that in the next few weeks. Customizable dashboard and pervasive granular security. What's next? If you've got further questions, and I will get round to answering questions in a minute. Well, the first question I'm going to answer is for Robert. Can we get a recording of this? I'll be sending you a link of the recording. You can then forward it to your colleagues or whatever, or use it for your own reference. Any further questions you didn't think of at the time, email me. My address is at the bottom of the screen now, and will stay there for a while. I apologize that it's a long email address, but at least it does what it says on the can. Email me again if you'd like a discussion about your particular needs and a personalized demonstration. Be very happy to do that. Join me for the remaining webinars in the series. We'll be dealing with a replacement synchronization engine, the Hypersync panel, next week. System panel, the week after, that's forms for seeing your data, and then the governance piece. And we'll be focusing on managing groups, although the governance piece will do more than that. That is access panel. So I've got a number of questions in no particular order. Does it keep track of sync rule updates in AD Connect? Not exactly. It's not designed to do that directly. Now, I might have to come back to you on that because I think there is something that we can do about that. But it's a nice question. I'll get back to you certainly about that. Another question is about the range of connectors available and how they're configured. Just like MIM, you would expect that there's a whole bunch of out-of-the-box connectors. Connectors are called providers in Identity Panel, management agents in MIM. In the same way, there are out-of-the-box ones. They're all configured through the UI. They're simply configured until perhaps you get to some more complicated cases. We have yet to come up against something we can't connect to, much the same as MIM. There's always a way of doing it. Another question is, when you say performant, can you be more specific? Really, there was nothing today to see regarding performance. Just to whet your appetite for next week, when we look at Hypersync Panel, you will be able to do things with Hypersync Panel you couldn't dream of doing with MIM. Full synchronizations are very time-consuming in MIM. They are lightning fast in Hypersync Panel, and we'll be talking about that in more detail. Can you create custom connectors? Yes, the answer is kind of yes and no, but what we found is that if you need a custom connector, Software IDM are extremely good at responding to that kind of need. So I think the answer is yes, you can always create your own, but probably with a bit of luck, you won't have to. Those are all the questions I've got for the moment. I've tried to stick to the discipline of keeping these to half an hour because there are 4 of them, and I just want people to be able to attend and not have to commit a huge amount of time. If you want more, just contact me. Very happy to spend time with you on this. That's it for now, and I hope to see you next week. Thank you very much.